They say evil does not need a pulse to live. It can seep into paint, metal, fabric, anything that once absorbed a human's touch. When I began researching cursed objects that people swear are real, I didn't expect the stories to connect. At first, they were only curiosities, news clippings about a painting that never burns, an antique box that ruins everyone who owns it, a doll that locks eyes even through glass. But the deeper I went, the stranger it became. Each item carried a thread that led to the next, as though they were speaking to one another across decades. I found the Crying Boy painting in an estate sale catalog from northern England. The description warned in bold ink, slight scorch marks on frame, artwork unharmed. I bought it, thinking I could test the myth myself for a documentary. The night it arrived, the air in my flat turned cold, not cool, but still, like the moment before thunder. My phone camera kept glitching when pointed at the painting, freezing on the boy's wet eyes. I thought maybe it was coincidence or just static, but when I left the room, I heard a sound like fire crackling in the walls. I ran back in, nothing. Just the painting, hanging crookedly, one tear reflecting the dim light like a living thing. The fear was small at first, like static under the skin, but by morning the smell of smoke lingered though nothing had burned. Somewhere between curiosity and dread, I began filming my own narration for cursed objects that people swear are real, my voice trembling slightly on each take, as if the objects themselves wanted to be heard. Days later, I visited a collector who claimed to possess the Dybbuk Box. His home sat on the edge of a barren hillside, surrounded by silent trees that bent inward as though eavesdropping. The man was pale, eyes hollow, his hands shaking when he spoke. "You'll hear knocking," he told me. "It never happens twice in the same place." The box sat in the center of a glass table, small, unassuming, with carved vines wrapping its surface. I set my recorder beside it and asked, "What happens if you open it?" He smiled, or maybe grimaced, and said, "You won't need to. It opens itself when it wants." I laughed nervously, a pattern interrupt to my own fear, trying to sound skeptical for the viewers. That's when the glass under the box quivered. Just once, the man didn't move. His eyes fixed on the box as the smell of flowers, faint but rotting, filled the air. I thought about how the story went, that a spirit of grief lived inside, a soul too heavy for the afterlife. My microphone picked up a whisper, one word drawn out, "Leave." When I played it back later, it wasn't my voice or his. It sounded like something caught in the recording, between frequencies. I packed my things and left, but when I got to my car, the passenger seat was wet, as though someone had been crying there. I drove home in silence, every passing shadow reflected in the windshield like a figure reaching out. That night I heard faint knocks, one from the wall, one from the ceiling, never the same place twice. It was then I realized that collecting stories about cursed objects that people swear are real might mean inviting them in. The third visit was the hardest. A private museum in Connecticut, home to the real Annabelle. I'd seen the films, but the real doll was smaller, softer, almost gentle. She sat in her glass case, a sign reading, "Positively do not open." The curator spoke quietly, explaining that visitors often fainted or grew nauseous near her. "It's not the doll," he said. "It's the faith people bring into this room. That's what feeds her." I recorded footage whispering my narration about cursed objects, while behind me the lights flickered in rhythm with my heartbeat. I turned, and for a fraction of a second I saw her head tilt. It could have been reflection, but my mind insisted otherwise. Later, reviewing the video, I noticed something behind me in the glass, a face, pale and distant, over my shoulder. The timestamp matched the moment I'd felt my chest tighten. Rationally, I told myself it was pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces in shadows. Yet that night, when I exported the footage, my editing software froze, and the screen filled with a single frame, her stitched smile, inches from the lens. No sound, no movement, just that image burned into the feed. I unplugged everything, leaving the room dark except for the red standby light of the camera, which seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the floor sounded like fabric stretching. I started to wonder whether documenting cursed objects that people swear are real had turned the lens around. That maybe I was no longer the observer, but the subject. Weeks later, a historian from Yorkshire contacted me about Busby's stoop chair, the so-called chair of death. "You've already crossed lines," he said over the phone. "If you touch that chair, there's no coming back." His warning only fueled my resolve. When I arrived at the small museum, the chair hung on a wall chained high above the floor out of reach. The guide told me stories of airmen who'd sat in it for luck before missions and never returned. He laughed softly, trying to lighten the mood. At least we keep it 6 feet up. Death apparently respects health and safety. The humor felt forced, brittle. I turned on my recorder and asked whether anyone had tried sitting in it recently. The guide hesitated. Once, he said. A teenager climbed up after closing time. I asked what happened. He didn't answer, so only looked down, eyes wet, muttering. The road was dry. The car just flipped. The room seemed colder, as though something unseen disapproved of our conversation. I stared up at the chair, noticing the worn indentations in the seat, polished by centuries of fear. I wanted to reach for it to prove the myth wrong, but my hand froze midair, a pressure like static electricity holding me still. Then came a sound, faint, dragging, like wood scraping across stone. The chain trembled. The chair swayed gently, though no air moved. The guide whispered, "It never does that." We backed away, and I shut off the recorder, pretending I hadn't seen the faint imprint of dust falling from the seat, as if someone invisible had just risen and walked out. That night in my hotel room, I dreamed of sitting in that chair. When I woke, my body ached like I'd been hit by something heavy. My phone screen displayed a notification I hadn't set. Video exported. The last seat. My hands shook too much to open it. By the time I reached the final segment of my documentary, I wasn't sure if I was filming a story or living one. Each cursed object left a residue, a feeling that clung to me like cold air after a graveyard. The crying boy still hung on my wall, though I'd tried taking it down 3 times. Each morning it was back in place. The Dybbuk Box footage corrupted every backup drive I owned. The Annabelle file replayed itself randomly at night, freezing on that frame of her smile. And the dream of the chair of death grew clearer. Now I could feel the rough wood beneath my palms. I stopped leaving the house. Shadows lengthened even when the lights were on. My voiceover for the film sounded detached, almost foreign, like someone else was speaking through me. These are the cursed objects that people swear are real. The line looped itself on my recorder one night, whispering faster each time until it blended into a single breathless chant. When I unplugged the mic, the whisper didn't stop. It came from inside the walls. I thought maybe it was the neighbors, but the apartment above me had been empty for months. I tried destroying the footage, the drives, the tapes, even the camera, but the files reappeared, renamed, each titled Final Cut. The worst part wasn't the noise or the shadows. It was the familiarity. I began recognizing faces and reflections. The boy from the painting, the old man who cursed the chair, the faint outline of the doll's grin, all hovering just behind my shoulder. I realized then that the curse wasn't tied to the objects anymore. It was tied to the story. Cursed objects that people swear are real had become its own curse, carried by whoever watched, whoever listened, whoever believed. And now you're hearing it too. Soft static fades in, a heartbeat underneath the silence. If you've felt the chill while listening, if you've noticed the shadows shift just slightly around you, maybe it's already found a way in. Don't look behind you, not yet. Wait until the room is completely still, because these cursed objects, these stories people swear are real, have a way of following attention. Every view, every whisper keeps them alive. The camera is still recording somewhere, maybe yours. And when the lights flicker, when your reflection lingers a second too long, you'll know you've joined the chain of witnesses. The only way to break it is to pass it on. Share the story. Let someone else watch. It's safer that way, or so they say, because now you're part of it, whether you believe or not. The next time something moves in your room when you're alone, don't ask what it was. Ask who it was. And if you dare to go further, to see what waits beyond the story, click to hear the next voice. But listen carefully, because it might already be calling your name.